Okay, so a lot of people have been asking me to do a video on how to take the IHS plates off a PS3. It's a common problem, like PS3s, underneath the IHS plates, these are the two IHS plates, underneath the IHS plates they've got thermal paste. For example, this customer who sent me his PS3, he changed the thermal paste on the normal location on the top, and it carried on overheating. So basically I'm going to remove his IHS plates, put new thermal paste underneath, and then reattach the IHS plates, and then it will put it back to normal. I generally recommend this for all PS3s, like if you're gonna, expect to bash out a PS3 for sort of anywhere between 4 to 10, 12 hours a day, then you're definitely going to want to do this to your PS3. I've prepped the CPU. What I've done is I've used this stuff, which I use I put it into a needle. It's called RMA paste. It's Gpu RMA 218, and it's sticky flux, and what it does is it helps to transfer the heat. So I'll just try and get a close up here. So as you can see, this shiny stuff here is the flux paste that I've put on. So what I've done is I've put it all around the edge. I've put it all around the edge of the CPU IHS plate, because around the edge of the CPU IHS plate is the glue, the Sony glue that they use to stick it down. With the GPU or the RSX, there's 4 RAM chips in the corner, and there's a little bit of glue on the top of each of these RAM chips, and then there's the shiny part of the chip which releases the heat, which has got the thermal paste on, and that's underneath the middle of the IHS plate. The CPU has only got the shiny part in the middle, and then around the edge it's got this glue, which is heat conductive glue. I think it's heat conductive glue anyway, but I use silicon heat conductive glue to reattach them back on, because obviously you want the glue to be heat conductive as well, so it helps to release as much heat as possible. So the GPU is a lot easier than the CPU. It's really easy to take off the GPU IHS plate. What I normally do is I use a screwdriver, a flathead, which I think is like flathead size 2, and I just put that in between the, in fact if I can just get a close up of that, I put that in between the green and yellow part of the chip and the IHS plate. And then what I'll do is I'll heat it up. I'll heat up each corner for about 5 seconds, and then after I've done all 4 corners and come back round to do these 2 that are closest to the CPU, it should just pop off. And what I do is I'll partially like wedge it off, but I'll also twist the screwdriver at the same time, which just helps to alleviate the pressure, like it minimises the pressure that you're putting onto the chip. The reason I put it under this part is because this is the part with no resistors and capacitors, whereas the other 3 sides have got little capacitors or resistors. So I'll show you how to remove the GPU IHS plate first, because it's the easiest. I use the heat gun on 500 degrees, and I use the airflow of 4 on the GPU or the RSX. So you just want to wait till the heat gun gets to maximum temperature, and then just each corner. Go, and then it will pop off, and then when it pops off, I'm just going to grab some tweezers and just remove that. Just grab a little bit of tissue and wipe off the middle shiny part of the chip. There you go. As you can see, The blue shiny part, well, it should be silver, but all PS3s, like, they endure heat damage, so the top will be blue, which will be caused from heat damage. It's notorious in fats, but it also happens in most slims as well. Like, it's just a general problem. Like, I think the super slim is the only one that doesn't really happen to. And then you've got the glue on the four corners. So what I like to do is, while the glue's still sort of warm from having the heat on, I'll use just a normal Stanley blade to scrape the glue off. You want to just, I mean, you don't have to worry too much about getting it off the sides of the RAM chips. If you want to, you know, spend the time getting it off the sides of the RAM chips, by all means go ahead. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's going to be a better job. I'm just going to show you how I get it off the top. So yeah, so as I say, like, I just use this Stanley blade. You don't have to worry too much about the RAM chips, because with them being plastic, they have like a plastic cover on the top, and that will protect them. So as long as you don't start scratching the rest of the chip, as long as you just keep the Stanley blade on the plastic part at the top, it should be fine. As I say, like, ideally you want to do it ideally straight away, because you can then get the glue off a lot easier, whereas if you wait until it's cooled down, it will just sort of all flake off, and then you end up scraping it off and it all flakes out. So I don't know if you can see this. Let me just move this over here. Right, so then I take it off the IHS plate as well, in the exact same way, with the Stanley blade. Just take the glue off each of the corners, because when you reattach it, obviously you don't want all this crappy glue still on there. Again, I recommend using some sort of silicone heat transfer glue. I'll leave a link in the description to, well, I say a link, I'll leave some information in the description about the stuff that I use. So, right, and then just want to clean the thermal paste off the middle of the IHS. There you go. Right, okay, just get that to one side. Right, so once you cleaned off the GPU IHS plate, then you want to clean off the actual board as well. Just brush that off. Right, there we go. Okay. Right, I normally use just like a little bit of MEK or something on the RAM chips. I normally do, like, I'll spend the time getting it off the corners as well, like, and off the edges, but didn't really want to make the video run too long, so I'm just trying to do as little as possible on camera. So right, so as you can see, again, like, the if you get one and it's silver, that's great. That means the PS3 hasn't been used much. But if the PS3 has been used much, the shiny part will be blue. I wouldn't worry too much about that. I mean, in my experience, like, it's not the end of the world. I mean, you can replace the whole chip if you want, you know, it's entirely up to you, like, but and then you just want to sort of get all the glue off the RAM chips, just make it all nice and clean and fresh for when you put it back on. Right, the CPU is a lot harder than the GPU. It's because of the all around the edge of the CPU or the cell chip. There'll be like a strip of glue around the edge. So I'll put this flux paste on around the edge. You'll see what I mean when you actually sort of look at it. There's like a little gap between the shiny green part of the chip and the IHS plate, and then you on the fats you can see the glue underneath, but on the slims not so much. So I'll put this paste, this flux paste around the edge, just to help to transfer the heat underneath, to try and help to melt the glue. And to be fair, it does work really well. I noticed that you don't have to have the heat on for as long, and it really cuts down the amount of time you have to have the heat gun on. Another thing is, it's really important what tools you use. So I have a different one for the slims than I do for the fats. This is just like a little nail file sort of thing that I've cut down into a pointy shape. In in the middle of the CPU, on the fats there's a couple of RAM chips here, but on the Slim they've changed it, and they've put these little resistors here to try and make it hard for you to remove. So ideally your tool needs to be a bit smaller when you're doing it on the Slim. So what you want to do is you want to sort of heat up just the edge, all around the edge. I normally do it for around about 1 minute and 20, something like that. Depends how hot the room is, like dependent on how long I do it for. So you want to run the heat gun all the way around, and then you want to get your little tool and you want to slot it into the little hole in the glue, and then you want to cut, just pull it along and it will cut through all the glue all around the edges. So I'll show you that now. So I use the heat gun again on 500, but with the CPU, I normally use the heat flow at about 3 to 3.5, the airflow rather. Okay, so I don't know whether you can see it on the video, but you'll see the the flux paste start to melt and run into liquid form, and it will run underneath to where the glue is, which is what we want, because it will help to heat up the glue. I mean, I've seen people do this for sort of 4 or 5 minutes, and that's just, for me, that's a no-no. You don't want the least amount of time that you can heat it up for, the better. You know, in an ideal world, you don't want to run the heat gun on it for too long, because it can cause other problems. I mean, it can damage the chip, it can damage stuff that's around it, it can even just warp the board. You know, and if you do stuff like that, then you've pretty much broke your ps3. Another thing is, I would say, like, I don't recommend just doing this on a working one straight away. If you've got some scrap boards which are no good and that can't be repaired, I would highly recommend practicing on some broken boards you've got, because I think out of the first sort of 10 I did, I ruined 4 boards. When you're actually cutting around the glue, if you scratch the CPU even just once in the wrong place, it's gonna just mess it up. When you're actually putting the tool in, there's no traces on the top of the CPU in that area. So when you're actually putting the tool in, you can scratch it in that area, but the rest of the chip, you know, it's, I mean, sometimes you can scratch it and you get lucky because it's only a light surface scratch, but you'll see when you remove one, and you'll see how the traces run in the top of the CPU on the top of the chip, and you'll see, like, it's just not a good idea to scratch it. When you put your tool in, you want to sort of, as you pull it across to the side, you want to pull it upwards as well, so that it sort of cuts the top of the glue, so that ideally you want it to sort of scratch on the bottom of the IHS plate, which will sort of cause, you know, a little bit less damage. Well, hopefully no damage. So I don't know if you can see the smoke coming off it from the flux paste burning away. As the flux paste burns away, it creates smoke. You just want to try and keep it around the edges. If you have it in the middle too much, like I don't know, me personally, I don't like to have it in the middle, because you're putting heat directly into the chip. I know you're heating up the IHS plate, but you know, I like to just keep it around the edge, because then you're getting the flux paste to help you do your job, sort of thing. You know, the flux paste is helping you to heat the glue. So, right. Okay. So what you want to do is, you want to get your tool, and then you want to find your entry point, which is always on this side. And you just want to sort of wiggle it in. There we go. And then you just put my other pair of gloves on. What I normally do is I'll normally sort of put my thumb on the one side of the chip, as I then pull the tool towards me, and what that will do is it'll sort of stop the putting too much pressure on the actual balls underneath. So there you go, and then you just want to sort of, oops, a little bit hot, drag it towards yourself. Should have used my other pair of gloves, really. So what you want to do is, once you've cut one edge, and then you just want to sort of find the same place where you were before. Once you've cut the one edge, you just want to find the same place you were before to get back in, and then pull it down the next edge. And as I say, like try not to be too rough with it, like just try and feel your way through it, sort of thing. There we go. There we go. Right, as you get towards the end of that side, I think you will have noticed it starts to tilt up. So what you want to do is just get your tweezers and just flip it up on that last bit. There you go. So now what I do is, while it's still fairly warm from the heat, I use another tool like the one that I used to cut the glue, to cut the chip off in the first place, but just slightly longer. And then I'll sand that down so that I know it's really smooth, and then I'll use that to scrape this glue off the actual chip, because you can't reattach it with all this glue still on, obviously, because you want a fresh chip to put your own glue on. So what I do is I just sort of scrape off all this grey glue, and again, you know, you really need to be very, very careful with this, because if you scratch the chip even just once, you'll ruin it. You know, unless you want to start like transferring reballing CPUs onto other consoles and swapping flashes and rewriting syscons, and you know, you really have to be very, very careful with it. It's really important that your tools are correct, which is why I say practice on dead boards, like fully broken boards, you know, because it doesn't matter if you damage them, and you can practice. You know, everyone's going to find like a slightly different routine, a slightly different method. You know, there might be something that I do that you don't want to do, that you think, oh well, I should do it like this, and whatever works for you, as long as it comes out with the same result, that's great. Do you know what I mean? So but as I say, like, you know, it's really important that your tools, you know, you can know how to do it as much as you want, but if your tools aren't correct, then the tools aren't correct, and you're not going to be able to do it properly. So what I normally do is I normally go to scratch this on my finger, on my fingernail, and if it starts to scratch off my fingernail, then I know it needs a little bit more sanding. Just sand the edge down a little bit with some sandpaper just to smooth it off. Because obviously, if it's, I mean, you could use some sort of plastic scraper, but what I found is I couldn't find anything that was good enough, that was sharp enough to cut the glue off. So that's why I used the metal scraper, which obviously it's a bit more dangerous, because if you do make one mistake, then you know you're screwed and you've ruined the whole chip. But for me personally, as long as you sand it down and you make sure that, I mean, I find I have to sand my tools down like after every sort of 3 or 4 PlayStations that I do, because cutting through the glue sort of takes its toll on the tool, and then you have to sort of sand it down again. So there we go. And then because of the flux paste that I use when taking the CPU off, I will use a little bit of MEK on a tissue to clean it off. So I'll just get a bit of tissue. Where's my MEK gone? Where's that gone? There you are. Just whack a bit on the tissue, and then just give it a nice wipe off. Just clean off all the gunky crap. As I say, like this is a customer's PS3 who he already changed the thermal paste in the normal position, but that didn't make any difference. It was still overheating, so he sent it to me, and I've removed the IHS plates and then I'll reattach them. So there we go. Just give it a little brush off. It's really handy to keep a brush. Okay, right. So with the CPU, as you can see, there's still like like a minor amount of glue still, but when you put the new glue on, the majority of heat's going to get through. I mean, you can spend the time scraping that down if you want, but for me, I've got to this point now, and that's acceptable. The heat's going to transfer through that, and for me, it's not worth risking taking that off, that extra bit, because it's unnecessary sort of thing. As you can see, like this one, the CPU, if I just tilt that, it's still silver, which normally is the case with the CPU. The CPU is normally still silver. It's normally the graphics chips that have took a bit of a beating, even on the slims. I think really the only one that doesn't take that much of a beating is the super slim. So main things to remember when reattaching are, on the shiny parts, you want Arctic Silver 5 or possibly MX4, but I always go with Arctic Silver 5. So the thermal paste will go on the actual chip itself, on there, and then I'll put a little bit of silicone heat transfer glue on each of the RAM chips. And then what I'll do is, I'll get the CPU IHS plate, and I'll put a little bit of silicone glue all around the edge, just all around the edge, and like leave a little gap. And then what I'll do is, when I put it back on, I'll line up the little gap so that the little gap is on the same side as the original gap, so that if anyone works on it in the future, they can just come along and do the exact same thing. So I'll leave a couple of a link to a couple of pictures which will just show you exactly what to do and where. If you've got any questions, just post some comments and I'll see if I can help you out. Thanks for watching.